Hello, I'm Peter, and welcome to a Tekken Intermediate Fundamentals video where today we're going to strive for progress, not perfection. Well, in this video, we will explore the topic of button buffering, what it is, how it works, why it works, and how it can be used in a couple of examples. Now, as a reminder, if you enjoy learning Tekken related things, being entertained, consider hitting that notification bell, subscribing, and getting the latest on all the new content I have available. So with that, let's go. Button buffering. Now, this is not to be confused with something called input buffering, which is something else entirely, and will start in another video separate from this one, in a later time. Now, button buffering is an age-old Tekken technique that's been around for quite a long time, and it's simply an alternative method to performing a multi-button input, performed by holding one button down while pressing another button. This is usually a technique that allows players to perform actions more accurately and more quickly. Button buffering is usually utilized for moves that require multiple buttons to be pressed simultaneously, but this isn't always the case. Now, we'll first take a look at what buffering looks like, and then explain why it works. So pay attention to the button inputs that you're going to see in the bottom of the gameplay screen. Now, watch as Fang does back 1 on counter hit into his back 1+2, his Iron Mountain. Notice here that after hitting the back 1, there is a string of 1 inputs accompanied by the directional inputs that you see. After the forward dash, the inputs suddenly change from the 1 input to a 1+2 input. When done correctly, this is what you can expect button buffering to look like. Now, here's another example. Lars's combo after orbital. Take a look, and then we'll discuss it. Alright, this is still button buffering, but with a little twist added to it. After orbital, we have forward 3-1, into forward 1-2-3, into DEN, dynamic entry. Notice after the 3 from forward 1-2-3, we immediately press the 1 input, which then allows the use of buffering into 1+2, Lars's screw attack. How and why button buffering works. The best way, in my opinion, to explain how button buffering works is probably through an example. So let's go back, rewind to the button buffering example with Fang. After performing back 1 and holding the 1 input, any movement will have that 1 button attached to it, even neutral inputs. So when you let go of your directional input, you get a neutral frame, the 1 button attached to it. As we can see in the inputs, the 1 button just follows along as we move about on the screen. Although this can be useful, the most interesting thing is what happens when you press another button. We get a simultaneous multi-button input. For example, if we press the 3 button while holding down the 1, we get a 1+3, a generic throw. If we press the 2 button while holding the 1 button, we get a 1+2 attack. And if we add directional inputs, that works as well. If we hold down the 1, press back and 2 at the same time, we get back 1+2. This is all possible because Tekken stores inputs for as long as the button is held down, allowing quick access to simultaneous button inputs. So that's easy enough to understand. But what if we're trying to buffer a button into something that doesn't share a button with the last input? For example, in the Lars orbital combo, how in the world do we buffer a 1+2 input when the last input that was pressed was a 3 input from the forward 1-2-3? The 1+2 clearly doesn't have a 3 input in it, so how How in the world are you going to buffer something like that? Well, let's use what we just previously learned in the Fang example and expound upon it in the Lars orbital combo for a buffering example. As we talked about, after the orbital into forward 3-1, pickup, we go into forward 1-2-3. But after the 3, we want to immediately press the 1 input to buffer for 1+2. The reason we want to press the 1 button to buffer for the 1+2 is to prevent scenarios like this. Here, we mess up the input of the 1+2, trying to time the simultaneous button input. Instead, we get dynamic entry 2, not dynamic entry 1+2. All because our fingers hit the 2 button a fraction of a second before the 1+2. Now, the reason we want to press the 1 button, or hell, if you would like, you could also do the 2 button as well, after forward 1-2-3, is because after the 3 input, Lars is transitioning into dynamic entry. And during that recovery window of the 3, I'm going to say it again, during the recovery window of the 3 button input, inputs can be stored, but not executed. We are taking full advantage of the recovery frames of the 3 input into dynamic entry to do this. Therefore, we can store the 1 input in preparation for the 1+2 after Lars is in dynamic entry. Then we can perform the dynamic entry 1+2. Notice there's actually quite a sizable window to buffer any button you want. So look here. See all the buttons that are being pressed in sequence after forward 1-2-3, and none of them get executed? Well, this is the idea. Buffer a button during the recovery window of a move so that it can be stored for later use. Even if the button was a different button than what was last pressed, this is how you store it. Alright, here is one last example of button buffering a different button than the original button pressed. And this one goes out to all you Brian junkies. So you can do a down back 3 into Chains of Misery. The idea here is going to be very simple, though the execution can be a little awkward and strange. After pressing the down back 3, immediately press the 1 input during the recovery window of the down back 3. Next, when you enter into crouch with the 1 button held, do the down forward input, and then just press the 2 button with the 1 button held down, and you'll execute the 1+2 input. And voila! Easy input, no mess. So I know some of you guys are like, oh, I can keybind this. It's not a problem for me. Yes, sure. I get it. But this just makes it slightly more accurate and better and easy to do. And by the way, if you think this technique is only relevant in select places, you are sorely wrong, my friend. Sorry. This technique of button buffering a different button than the original button pressed during the recovery windows of a move can be found in a bunch of different places, aside from the 2 examples here. There will be more. I'll show them. They'll be in the example sections of the video. Peter, why the fuck do I even want to bother with button buffering? Why? Well, the primary reason for this, and I've already hinted at this, is that it's for button accuracy. Because we're only human and are prone to making mistakes from time to time, and I don't care how good you are, every now and then you're gonna make a mistake of plinking, right? You're gonna make a mistake of plinking, sliding, drumming, or whatever you want to call this action, where you take 1 button and then you press it slightly before the other button when you're trying to get an actual simultaneous button input. So each of our fingers have a different length, and each time we go to press a button, our hand and our wrist don't always sit at the exact same angle. Thus, the buttons will sometimes come out not simultaneously. So they come out staggered. Sometimes this is not a big deal, but other times this can be devastating. Imagine doing a combo. For example, if we take Kazumi's wall combo against male characters, right? Forward 3-2 into 1+2. Normally this wall combo damage, just the wall combo section, does 24 points of damage. However, if we drop this 1+2 input ender because we accidentally pressed 2-1, then we just missed out on 15 points of damage completely, and essentially let our opponent slip out and maybe even punish us for this. However, with button buffering, we can minimize the issue here by pressing forward 3-2, holding on to the 2 input, and then just pressing the 1 with the 2 held, getting the 1+2 input. Now, some of you guys are furiously typing and writing your answers, but Peter, I have button bindings for this. I have 1+2 bound. I have 3+4 bound. I have 1+3. I have 2+4 bound because I have 8 fucking buttons or 10 fucking buttons on my arcade stick or whatever. Okay, this is true. This is true. You can do button bindings for simultaneous inputs. But I want you to consider this. I want you to think and consider this. If you're playing on an arcade stick, the less you have to move your hand around the buttons, the more accurate you can be with the button presses, and the less accidental presses you will get. The more times you have to move your hand around to the various buttons that are outside of the 4 main buttons that you're using, the more times you're prone to making an accident of pressing an unwanted button. Our goal is to reduce the number of input errors as much as possible so that we can spend more time doing the things we want to do instead of being frustrated by the things that we don't want to do. Even with all the various button bindings you may have on your controller, it is still very useful in my eyes to button buffer, simply to minimize input error because of the hand moving from the primary 4 buttons to the secondary 4 buttons on the right. Initially, will this feel weird? Absolutely, man. This is going to be weird. It's going to feel strange and you're not going to like it. Absolutely. But with all things, practice, practice, practice. Over time, this will become second nature to you. I mean, just think about how awkward it was to use a stick initially. But then over time, you got used to it. Or maybe initially, you used to play on pad, right? And you didn't use any of the button bindings, and then you got used to it. So whatever the example is, you'll get used to button buffering the more you do it. It's an extremely powerful technique to use once mastered. Alright, now for examples. This section wouldn't be complete if we didn't take a look at other characters that could utilize button buffering and the things that we've talked about. First up, Armor King. Here is a very standard poke pressure, or rather a feel your opponent out scenario. Standing jab into down forward 1 into down forward 1. This is pretty low key and low risk. However, what we notice is our opponent is responding immediately with a magic 4, or perhaps responding with a down forward 1 before our second down forward 1 even comes out. Well, what can we do in this case? We can actually, with some evasive maneuvering and button buffering, land some chunky damage on our opponent. After the first down forward 1, we don't go for another down forward 1. Instead, we go for a back 1+4. And the way to do this is to, after the first down forward 1, hold the 1 input, buffering it in preparation for the back 1+4. So when the time comes, all we have to do is press the back 4, since the 1 has already been stored as an input, and then we get back 1+4. Now to follow up with a guaranteed forward 1+4, all we have to do is let go of the 4 input while still holding the 1 input this whole time, because we've been storing it this whole time. We just have to press forward 4, and then we get forward 1+4. Easy. And this is how you can get a consistent Armor King back 1+4 into forward 1+4 without having to do button bindings, without having to let your hand go of the 1+4 and try to hit it simultaneously again. Now, let's go on to the next example with King. So this King combo will involve the technique that we use with the Lars orbital combo, where we had to button buffer a different button than the original one that was pressed during the recovery frames of the last move. So to start, we do a hop knee into a standing 4, into a dash, into 1-2, followed by a standing jab into forward 1. All this pretty self-explanatory until we get to the forward 1. Here, we just pressed the 1 input, but we're immediately going to buffer the 2 button and perform a instant running 2+4, aka Shining Wizard. And the reason we want to buffer for this combo is because this combo can be notorious for having the Shining Wizard come out like this, due to accidentally messing up the input. So to repeat once more for clarity, after the forward 1, we very quickly press the 2 button to store its input. And then when we run up, we're going to press the forward and 4 at the same time, and we get forward 2+4 for the Shining Wizard. Last example incoming, and it's with Kazumi. So I chose this one because it has multiple instances of button buffering involving the 2 different techniques that we talked about previously. So the combo starts with a counter hit 4, followed by a back 2 for the screw. Immediately after pressing the back 2, we buffer the 4 button in preparation to perform fly 3+4. Those of you who don't know, fly 3+4 is performed by pressing forward 3+4 and then 3+4 again. Now, while holding the 4 input, we're going to press forward 3, which will perform the fly. Then we let go of the 3 input while still storing the 4 input, and then just press the 3 input again. And that's how we can get back-to-back 3+4 inputs. That's the first part of the buffer. Next is the down forward 1 for the float into back forward 2-1. After we hit the 1, we're now going to buffer the 1 button that we're later on going to need for the 1+2. And so when the time comes, we're holding the 1 button, and when we need the last hit, which is going to be the tiger that comes out, we press 2 while holding the 1. And bada bing, bada boom, we get the last hit, and that's the 2 button buffers used in efficiently carrying out the Magic 4 combo for Kazumi. So I hope this video helped some of you guys out there who were curious about what button buffering is, how it works, why it works, and the potential uses of it. Do you need it? No, you don't really need it. But will it make your life easier, and is it a powerful technique? Absolutely. I mean, you don't need to have a bicycle or have a car, but will it make your life easier? Hell yeah, it will. You can walk around everywhere you want to get to where you need to be, but if you have another mode of transportation, it'd be easier. And in my eyes, that's kind of how button buffering is. It makes some things that might be trivial or easy to mess up into almost foolproof. So if any of you guys have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments section below. But this is where I sign out and let you guys know that if you've enjoyed any of this content whatsoever, feel free to leave me a like, hit the notification bell, hit that sub bell. I really appreciate that. A lot of work goes into these videos, so yeah, let me know how much you guys like it. So, and thank you so much, patrons. You guys have helped me tremendously in being able to expand this channel, increase the quality of the videos that you guys see from time to time, and truly, you guys have been a big support in helping all of this grow. And with that, thank you everybody for taking the time to watch this video. I'm Peter, and now I'm heading out. Take care, guys. See you next time.